I want to start with something small, a cylinder seal in a museum in Berlin. Catalog number Vive a 243, Blackstone, palm size, the kind of object a Sumerian official would have worn on a cord around their neck and pressed into wet clay to leave their mark. When you roll it across a flat surface, it produces an impression, a scene, figures, symbols, arranged in the visual language of a civilization that has been gone for 4,000 years. In the center of that impression is a star. Around the star, arranged in a pattern that has no obvious ritual or decorative logic, are 11 smaller bodies. They vary in size. Some appear to have smaller bodies near them. The arrangement has a spatial coherence to it, a central object, orbiting bodies, a system. This seal is approximately 4,500 years old. I looked at it for a long time before I let myself ask the obvious question. And the obvious question is not whether the Sumerians had a telescope. They did not. The question is something more careful and more interesting than that. It is this: what did the people who made this object understand about the structure of the sky above them? And where did that understanding come from? Because when you start pulling that thread, the answer the Sumerians themselves give is consistent, specific, and almost entirely ignored by the people who study them for a living. They say someone taught them. The Sumerians are the civilization that should not exist in the way they do. They appear in the historical record already fully formed, with writing, with mathematics, with a calendar system, with astronomical knowledge, precise enough that we still use its framework today. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle. The Sumerian base, 60 numerical system, developed nearly 5,000 years ago, is so embedded in how we measure time and angles that most people use it every day without knowing its origin. That's not a coincidence, that's inheritance. We inherited it from the Babylonians, who inherited it from the Sumerians, who, according to their own texts, received it from someone else. The mul.apin tablets are a set of cuneiform documents that constitute the most comprehensive astronomical catalog to survive from the ancient world. They list the stars and constellations, document the rising and setting of celestial bodies across the year, track the movements of the planets, and record the mathematical relationships between lunar and solar cycles with a precision that modern astronomers have verified against their own calculations. The Venus tablet of Ammisaduqa, a Babylonian document recording the appearances of Venus over a 21-year period, is accurate enough to be used by historians today to anchor the absolute chronology of the ancient Near East. These are not the observations of people who looked up and guessed. These are the records of a sustained, institutionally supported, mathematically sophisticated program of celestial observation that produced results accurate enough to still be computationally useful 4,000 years later. The question that the academic literature treats as settled, that this knowledge was developed gradually through incremental accumulation of naked eye observation over centuries, is not as settled as it presents itself. Because the Sumerians themselves do not describe their astronomical knowledge as something they developed. They describe it as something they received. The Apkallu were 7 beings sent by the god Enki from his domain in the underground freshwater realm at Eridu. They emerged from the sea before the Great Flood and lived among human beings. The Babylonian priest Berosus, writing in the 3rd century BCE for the court of a Greek king and drawing on temple archives that no longer exist, describes the first of them a creature called Oannes, in terms that are precise enough to be unsettling. The body of a fish, the head, feet, and voice of a man. He emerged from the Persian Gulf during the day. He taught writing, he taught mathematics, he taught the sciences. He returned to the sea at night and ate nothing while among humans. What Berossus describes is not a myth in the soft cultural sense. He presents it as a historical record. It is the explanation for how a civilization that produced writing and mathematics and a cosmological framework of extraordinary complexity came to possess those things so suddenly, so completely, so far ahead of what the incremental development model would predict. The Apikalu gave it to them. And among the things the Apikalu gave them, according to the textual tradition, was the knowledge of the heavens. Now, I want to go somewhere that most discussions of Sumerian astronomy do not go, because I think it is where the genuinely interesting question lives. The Enuma Elish is the Babylonian creation epic, drawing on Sumerian cosmological sources considerably older than its written form. It describes in its opening sections a primordial state, a time before the current arrangement of the heavens existed, when large bodies moved in ways that produced the world as it now is. The text has been interpreted as pure theology, as myth-making, as the ancient Near Eastern equivalent of a creation story that no one is meant to take literally. But the text describes things happening. Bodies in motion, collisions, new bodies being formed from the interaction of older ones, the establishment of the current arrangement from a prior, different one. Zecharia Sitchin's reading of this text, that it describes a planetary collision, a rogue body entering the early solar system and producing the current arrangement of planets, is the version that gets the most attention in alternative history circles, and the version that mainstream scholarship refuses to engage with because of who is proposing it rather than what is actually being proposed. I am not here to defend Sitchin's specific conclusions. What I'm pointing at is something more basic. The Enuma Elish uses language that, if you take it seriously as descriptive rather than purely metaphorical, is describing physical events involving large bodies in space. The question of whether that language preserves a memory of something real, an ancient astronomical event encoded in mythological form because mythological form was the available container, is a question the academic literature has not seriously engaged with. It has been classified, filed, and moved past. The classification is myth. The question it does not ask is, what if the myth is a record? Back to the cylinder seal in Berlin, the academic interpretation of VA 243 is that the central figure surrounded by bodies is a deity. The image shows a divine figure surrounded by stars in the conventional Sumerian artistic tradition. The arrangement is iconographic, not astronomical. The bodies around the center are stars, not planets. The varying sizes are artistic rather than meaningful. This interpretation is defensible. Ancient Near Eastern art does place divine figures among stars. Stellar symbolism is pervasive in Sumerian and Babylonian visual culture, but it does not explain the specifics. The central body is larger than the surrounding ones in a way that maps more onto a sun and planet's relationship than a deity and stars' relationship. The surrounding bodies vary in size in ways that are not typical of purely decorative star arrangements, which tend toward uniformity or symmetry. Some of the surrounding bodies appear to have smaller objects near them, satellites if you read it one way, or simply artistic variation if you read it the other. What I keep coming back to is the context. This is a civilization that tracked Venus across a 21-year cycle with sufficient precision that those records are still computationally useful. This is a civilization that divided the circle into 360 degrees and divided time into units of 60, in a framework specifically designed for describing circular motion and angular relationships. This is a civilization whose astronomical records, when checked against modern calculations, consistently prove accurate. When that civilization pressed an image into wet clay that appears to show a central stellar body surrounded by orbiting objects of varying sizes, the default assumption that they could not have been depicting what appears to be shown deserves more scrutiny than it typically receives. And then there is the question the Sumerians themselves keep raising: the astronomical knowledge preserved in the mole, APIN tablets in the Venus records, in the mathematical framework that structures the entire Babylonian astronomical tradition. This knowledge is presented in every Sumerian text that addresses its origin as transmitted rather than developed. The Apkallu brought it, Enki gave it. The divine beings who emerged from the sea before the flood taught it to humanity and then withdrew. The mainstream scholarly response to this is the standard one. Ancient peoples universally attribute their knowledge and innovations to divine or supernatural sources, because divine attribution is how pre-scientific cultures explain the accumulation of wisdom over time. The Apkallu are treated as a mythological device for explaining cultural achievement, not as a historical record of actual transmission. That explanation is coherent. It is also, applied uniformly, a way of never having to ask whether the claim might be true. Every ancient tradition that says knowledge came from outside gets reclassified as mythology, and the question is closed. The circularity is invisible because the classification happens before the investigation. What would it look like to take the Sumerian claim at face value? Not literally, not fish-headed beings from the Persian Gulf as physical beings, but structurally. What would it look like if the Sumerian astronomical knowledge genuinely represented an inherited tradition rather than an independently developed one? What would the evidence look like? And is there any of that evidence available? The starting point of the documented Sumerian astronomical tradition is sophisticated, not primitive and gradually improving, already sophisticated from the earliest records we have. The incremental development model predicts a beginning that looks rough and becomes refined. What we actually find is a beginning that is already refined, in ways that suggest the refinement happened before the records begin. If you inherited a tradition rather than building it, that is what the evidence would look like. A starting point that is already advanced. An absence of the early stumbling that accompanies genuine development from scratch. A claim repeated consistently across the culture's own texts that the knowledge came from outside. The Sumerians said they received their astronomical knowledge from beings who came from the sea, taught everything, and left. They preserved that claim in their religious texts, their king lists, their creation epics. Berossus, a Babylonian priest with access to temple archives that have since been destroyed, wrote it down for a Greek audience 2,000 years after the fact and presented it as historical record rather than myth. The cylinder seal in Berlin sits in a glass case. The mol.apin tablets are translated and published. The Venus records are available. The base 60 mathematical framework is the one we use to measure every hour of every day. The Sumerians left us everything except the answer to the question they themselves keep raising. Where did they learn to read the sky like that? And who came out of the sea to teach them? I keep returning to the seal. 11 bodies around a central star pressed into black stone 4,500 years ago by hands that understood the heavens in ways we are still trying to account for. The academic literature looks at it and sees religious iconography. I look at it and see someone trying to show the person who would press this clay exactly what the sky looks like from far enough away. Maybe that is a reach. Maybe it is exactly what it looks like. The question is still open. And the people who made that seal told us in every text they left behind that they did not figure it out themselves. I think that is worth taking seriously, and I think it is strange that we have not.
The Cappadocia region in central Turkey has long been considered one of the most stunning and picturesque regions on Earth. From all over the world, tourists and photographers come to revel in its pink and yellow-hued hillsides, next to deep red canyons, and its legendary fairy chimneys, those natural stone towers shaped and sculpted out of the area's soft volcanic rock by millennia of erosion. And yet, as stunning as the landscape is, there is much more to the region than first meets the eye. Hidden beneath the ground are unexplained mysteries which challenge the foundations of our modern world, secrets that continue to baffle science to this very day. In 1963, the Derinkuyu district of Cappadocia, Turkey, a local man doing renovations on his home began to notice something most curious taking place. The chickens which he kept on his property had started to disappear inexplicably, seemingly vanishing into thin air. The man believed that the chickens must somehow be squeezing through a crevasse in one of his walls which had formed during the renovation. But if they were, why could he not hear them behind the wall, he wondered, and why did they not re-emerge from the crevasse when they were hungry? Hoping to find an answer, the man took a sledgehammer to the wall. Behind the wall, the man was shocked to find a hidden room which he was not previously aware of. More alarmingly, at the far end of this room was a dark passageway that appeared to descend into the earth. Nervously following this passageway, the man quickly discovered that it led to a strange underground labyrinth of passages and caves. Fearful of venturing too far into this labyrinth and becoming lost, the man returned to the surface and immediately contacted local authorities, who rushed to the site with a team of scientists and began conducting an official investigation into the man's unusual discovery. When they did, what they found stunned even the most experienced among them. The labyrinth was actually only the beginning of an enormous underground complex descending more than 275 feet into the earth across 18 distinct levels of tunnels. Incredibly, it appeared that the complex was part of an entire lost civilization tucked safely underground, and each of its 18 levels was carefully engineered for specific uses. There were dwellings, meeting places, and schools, even a temple. There were livestock stables and cellars for making and storing wine. There was a well running 180 feet into the earth to provide the complex with water, and thousands of small ventilation shafts to ensure natural airflow reached all 18 levels. Moreover, the complex appeared to have an elaborate system of defenses, including intentionally short and narrow hallways, which would force unwanted intruders to stoop over and walk in single file, as well as huge half-ton circular boulders between each level, which were only movable from the inside and could be placed to seal off each level from the others. As it turned out, the man had accidentally discovered what would become known as the Derinkuyu underground city, which scientists estimated could have at one time housed upwards of 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food stores. It was clear to researchers that the Cappadocia region was uniquely situated for the construction of just such a city, with the area's distinctive, easy-to-carve volcanic rock, meaning that whoever had made Derinkuyu could have done so using little more than shovels and pickaxes. But that was just the thing. While researchers were well aware of how Derinkuyu was built, they actually had no idea who built it. The Cappadocia region is located as a sort of middle point between continents, a bridge between Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. As such, the area has seen a succession of empires throughout its history, from the Assyrians and Persians to the Greeks and Romans to the Ottoman Empire. It is an area that has been in constant conflict, changing hands from one great power to another as centuries passed. For this reason, scientists believe that Derinkuyu was created as a sort of temporary shelter from foreign invaders, a hideaway for conquered populations and persecuted groups during times of conflict. Within the city, scientists found archaeological evidence that it had been used by early Christians hiding from Roman persecution and locals to escape the Arab-Byzantine wars of 780 to 1180 AD. They found that it had been used as protection from the Mongol hordes in the 14th century and by the persecuted ethnic groups during the time of the Ottoman Empire. And yet, while this may have explained who Derinkuyu was used by, it did not actually reveal who built it. Some scientists propose that it could have been built as far back as 1200 BCE by the Hittites, who ruled most of the region at that time, a theory that emerged after Hittite artifacts were found within the complex. Others asserted that while the Hittites may have created a level or two of the complex, the bulk of the work was almost certainly done by the Phrygians between the 8th and 7th centuries BCE. The reasoning behind this was that the Phrygians, one of the region's first truly dominant empires, were accomplished builders and architects, recognized for monumentalizing rock formations and creating remarkable rock-cut facades. Yet each of these theories were simply that, theories. Speculation without conclusive proof one way or the other. This led many to believe in the possibility that both the Hittites and the Phrygians were just another groups of people who simply used the site. They were not the original builders, meaning the city was far, far more ancient than anyone ever thought possible. The real problem which prevented scientists from giving a definitive answer on who built Derinkuyu was that the volcanic rock it was carved out of could not be carbon dated, since it was stone and not organic material. This left the question unanswered, disparate theories unproven and unverified. The only thing scientists knew for sure was that it had been used for thousands of years by those looking to hide, changing hands and being used by different groups, who each likely added to the work of the last, all the way until the 1920s, when the site was officially abandoned after ethnic Greek populations were deported following the Greco-Turkish War. It appeared that the mystery of who built Derinkuyu would have to stay a mystery. The site, just another unexplained marvel of the ancient world. And perhaps that's where the story would have ended, except in the years that followed, the mystery would go much deeper and get even more bewildering. Barely 1 year after the discovery of Derinkuyu, workers in the village of Kemakli, only a few miles away, uncovered another strange labyrinth of underground tunnels while digging into a hill known as the Citadel of Kemakli. As excavations were conducted, their suspicions were confirmed. It was another underground city complex, much like Derinkuyu. There were dwellings and storage rooms, wineries and stables, and even a burial chamber, all connected by more than 100 tunnels dug into the ground, which could be shut off by huge boulders moved over the entrances from the inside. While the Kemakli underground city was not as large as Derinkuyu, it had a sprawling layout which actually made it wider. Either way, it was another monumental construction hidden beneath the ground. As it was explored further, something even more remarkable was discovered. Deep within the Kemakli complex were a series of tunnels that stretched all the way to Derinkuyu, some 5 miles away. Not only were there 2 underground cities in Cappadocia, but it appeared they were sister cities, physically connected and perhaps built by the same unknown ancient builders. On its own, this raised all sorts of questions, but in fact, the discoveries did not stop there. In 1972, some 35 miles north of Derinkuyu, in the village of Aschanak, a local farmer became perturbed when he noticed that the water he was giving his crops seemed to just disappear into the ground. Surveying his fields in an attempt to find the source of the problem, the farmer came across a hidden underground chamber concealed beneath the earth. With the discoveries of Derinkuyu and Kemakli only a few years prior still fresh in mind, the farmer contacted local authorities to examine the chamber further. When they did, they found that it once again opened up to reveal a massive underground city complex, descending some 130 feet into the ground across 10 carefully constructed levels. Like Derinkuyu and Kemakli, the underground city at Aschanak contained dwellings and storage areas, stables and wine cellars, a well and a ventilation system, and rolling stone doors. Interestingly, it also contained a rudimentary communication system that allowed each level to talk to the one above or below, as well as holes drilled into the stone above the entrance to each level, which would allow for hot oil to be poured on the intruders. While Aschanak was marginally smaller than the other underground cities previously found, its discovery did raise more interesting questions. At 35 miles away, had it been built by the same builders? And if so, why the additional features? Moreover, could it be connected as the other two were by underground tunnels? Whatever the answers, what was clear was that the mystery went beyond just a small area surrounding Derinkuyu. In fact, as the years passed and further research was conducted, scientists began to realize that there was an entire underground world beneath Cappadocia. In nearly every village across the region, there was at least one rock-cut structure under the ground, most of them small, only a room or two, but indicating a widespread predisposition to underground building. It appeared to scientists that an entire underground civilization had existed at one time in the Cappadocia region, centering around city centers in Kaymakli and Aschanak and the de facto capital at Derinkuyu. This theory remained until modern times, when, without warning, everything scientists thought they knew was blown out of the water. In 2012, Turkey's Housing Development Administration launched an urban transformation project in the Cappadocian city of Nevşehir, which would demolish old, decrepit buildings near the city's Byzantine-era Nevşehir fortress and replace them with modern new builds. As the project got started, workers began to uncover a series of underground tunnels leading back beneath the fortress. It had been 40 years since the last discovery of an underground city in Cappadocia, so workers assumed that surely this could not be what they were uncovering. But it was. Upon further examination, it appeared that, once again, a massive underground city complex had been found. Like the cities at Derinkuyu, Kaymakli, and Aschanak, this new city contained many of the same characteristics. The rooms, stables, cellars, the water and ventilation systems, and the massive stone doors. Except when geophysicists from Nevşehir University used seismic tomography and geophysical resistivity technology to map the labyrinth beneath the ground, they were blown away. It appeared this new city extended over an unfathomable 5 million square feet, descending more than 370 feet into the ground. This meant that the underground city at Nevşehir actually appeared to be bigger than Derinkuyu. In fact, up to 30% bigger, scientists believed. In other words, whoever had built Cappadocia's underground cities, their work was far more extensive than initially understood, and Derinkuyu was not their most marvelous creation. And yet, before Nevşehir could even be fully excavated and explored, something even more amazing happened. Something which, again, changed the entire perception of Cappadocia's underground cities. More than 500 miles from Derinkuyu, far removed from the Cappadocia region in southeastern Turkey, lies the historic city of Midyat. In 2020, workers conducting routine restoration work designed to conserve historic streets and houses in the city's old town uncovered a hidden entrance to a cave in one of the houses they were working on. Descending into the cave, the workers found a passage leading to an immense underground complex. Could this be another Derinkuyu, they wondered? Another Nevşehir? They were hundreds of miles outside the Cappadocia region, hundreds of miles from any other underground building projects which had previously been discovered. The answer was both yes and no. Certainly, there was an enormous underground city beneath Midyat, which came to be called Matyat, or City of Caves. Yet, as excavation began, researchers quickly realized that this underground city would not only far exceed the size of Derinkuyu, but it was likely to dwarf even the city found at Nevşehir. Indeed, while Nevşehir was estimated to be up to 30% larger than Derinkuyu, researchers believed that Matyat would be more than 300% bigger. This forced researchers to completely reimagine their conception of Turkey's underground cities. If there was an underground civilization sometime in the past, then it was not just Cappadocia, but in fact, it extended as far as Matyat, suggesting a massive underground network spreading across the entire country and perhaps beyond. Who could have created such an unfathomable network, and why? There are some who say that an answer has recently been revealed. In the same year that Derinkuyu was discovered in Cappadocia, 1963, researchers conducting a survey in southeastern Turkey came across another unusual site, not far from where Matyat would be found almost 60 years later. It was called Gobekli Tepe, or Belly Hill, and at the top of this hill, researchers found broken slabs of limestone strewn in every direction. Curious as this was, researchers believed the site to be little more than a medieval cemetery, so they simply made a note of it and moved on. It was not until 1994 that the site would be revisited by a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt during his own survey of sites in the region. Unlike those before him, he did not simply make note of Gobekli Tepe and move on. Instead, he immediately believed the site to be something special. Far from merely a medieval cemetery, according to Schmidt, it was clear right away this was a gigantic Stone Age site. As research began, Schmidt would be proven correct, and in fact, it would go much further than even he imagined. Buried below the surface of the hill were a series of megaliths up to 18 feet tall and weighing as much as 50 tons, arranged in circular patterns and covered in detailed carvings of humanoid figures, animals, and abstract symbols. Even more important and more astonishing, the site was carbon dated at between 9600 to 8200 BCE, making it at least 5,000 years older than Stonehenge. Simply, Gobekli Tepe was home to the world's oldest known megaliths. But who had been around that far in the past to create something so unbelievable? Who had moved Gobekli Tepe's 50-ton blocks and inscribed them with such detailed carvings? As Schmidt put it, we're 6,000 years before the invention of writing here. The mystery only deepened as the study on the site continued. In 2014, researchers digging deeper into the site uncovered evidence of a year-round settlement. This implied that the builders of Gobekli Tepe had not simply been nomadic hunter-gatherers who had built a monument in the middle of nowhere, as had been assumed, but an established civilization, one older than any on record. Who was this civilization, scientists wondered, and why had they not appeared in our history books previously? To this day, research continues, though so delicate is the site that barely 5% has yet been excavated. As more and more is uncovered in the coming years, what new revelations will emerge about the site and the mysterious civilization that built it? Furthermore, some are asking why they would have built it, and why such effort would have been put into such a massive building project so far in the past. For many, answering the why would have profound implications on our understanding of human development. Some believe that Gobekli Tepe will prove to have been a religious site for one of the world's earliest religions. Schmidt himself called it the first human-built holy place and a cathedral on a hill, while others speculate that it could have been the world's first astronomical observatory aligned with the Sirius star. In either case, the implications would be substantial. But in fact, in 2017, two scientists came forward with a different and even more significant answer. That year, chemical engineers Martin Sweatman and Dimitrios Tsikritsis began examining Gobekli Tepe's famous vulture stone, a pillar intricately carved with depictions of different animals, figures, and designs, which had long puzzled scientists. The two men believed that the vulture stone was, in Sweatman's words, encoding some kind of information, and upon closer examination, they thought they knew what that information was. They proposed that the animals depicted on the pillar were, in fact, zodiacal representations of ancient constellations, a scorpion as Scorpio, a duck-like figure as Libra, a wolf as Lupus, and so on, each arranged around a circular shape in the center representing the sun. In this way, Sweatman and Tsikritsis believed that the vulture stone provided a date stamp for some sort of event in human history, the carvings recording a time in the past when the constellations were arranged as they were on the stone. But what could this event have been? Sweatman and Tsikritsis believed the vulture stone provided an answer for that too. They declared that the series of square symbols near the top of the pillar, with strange lines descending from them, represented the fragments of a comet falling to Earth, while the headless man in the bottom right corner symbolized the disaster and loss of life these fragments brought to the Earth. As they proposed in their seminal article in Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry Journal, the vulture stone was a memorial to this devastating event, probably the worst day in history since the end of the Ice Age. Their most interesting and important piece of evidence that this was true was not simply their interpretation of ancient carvings, but what happened when they tried to determine when this proposed comet event had taken place. If the carvings were recording a specific date according to the alignment of the constellations, then what was this date? Using computer software, Sweatman and Socrates had determined 3 times in the past in which the constellations were aligned as depicted on the vulture stone: 4350 BCE, 10,950 BCE, and 18,000 BCE. Why was this so important? Because 10,950 BCE corresponded perfectly with something called the Younger Dryas event. Younger Dryas was a 1,300-year event, roughly 12,900 to 11,600 years ago, in which the Earth underwent a period of global cooling, which pushed many parts of the Earth into Ice Age conditions. Geological and archaeological records show that this period was one of terrifying destruction across the globe. A time of super tsunamis and mass flooding, of severe wildfires which fill the atmosphere with enough ash to block out the sun, a period of worldwide animal extinctions. While the existence of the Younger Dryas event is well documented, scientists have always been unsure of what exactly caused it. One of the leading hypotheses which has long existed is that the Younger Dryas event was caused by a comet exploding in Earth's atmosphere, showering the planet with fragments, the largest of which would have crashed into the ice caps covering North America at the time, vaporizing them instantly and throwing the Earth's entire ecosystem out of whack. According to Sweatman and Socrates, the vulture stone at Gobekli Tepe showing the constellations in exactly the position they would have been in when the Younger Dryas event took place was, in fact, a record of the event taking place and, moreover, of it specifically being caused by a comet. As Sweatman said in an interview, "I think this research, along with the recent finding of a widespread platinum anomaly across the North American continent, virtually seal the case in favor of a Younger Dryas comet impact." Could this be true? Could Younger Dryas have definitely been caused by a comet? And could the vulture stone at Gobekli Tepe be a record of this disaster laid down by an ancient civilization missing from our history books? If so, what does this have to do with the underground cities found near Gobekli Tepe and all across Turkey? The answer may lie in the fact that Gobekli Tepe may not be the only place where a record of the Younger Dryas event exists in the region. Zoroastrianism is one of the world's oldest known organized religions, an Iranian religion based on the teachings of the prophet Zoroaster. Zoroastrianism is so old, in fact, that we're not even sure exactly how old it is. It first enters written history in the 6th century BCE, but it is widely accepted that its roots go back to at least the 2nd millennium BCE. Even then, it was almost certainly based on oral traditions, which were much older than that. However old it is, it's known that Zoroastrianism was the first to introduce and codify concepts like heaven and hell, judgment after death, messianism, angels and demons, and the dualistic cosmology of good and evil. In fact, it is well established that Zoroastrianism influenced the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, as well as Buddhism and Hinduism, and even Greek philosophy. Indeed, many of the foundational stories in these traditions are simply retellings of older Zoroastrian tales. Just look at the biblical story of Noah's Ark, which is a relatively straightforward retelling of the Zoroastrian story of Yima. In the Vendidad, a foundational text to Zoroastrianism, a man named Yima is given a warning of an impending catastrophe that will wipe out the Earth's human and animal populations. Instead of a flood, as in the story of Noah, Yima's catastrophe is to be a deep freeze. As the text reads, O Yima, towards the sacred land will rush evil as a severe fatal winter. Evil will rush as thick snowflakes, falling in increased depth. Instead of an ark, Yima is instructed to build a multi-level underground settlement, a self-sustaining city with water and plants, and bring to it 2,000 human couples and every kind of animal. There, Yima is to remain, as Noah did on his ark, waiting out the deep freeze which would wipe out the rest of the earth. The story ends with Yima's people re-emerging from this underground city after many generations, having survived the fatal winter and thus going on to repopulate the earth. Here, a simple question can be asked. Does this not sound like a group surviving the 1300-year deep freeze of Younger Dryas? Take a step back and begin to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Zoroastrianism is an Iranian religion. Iran, of course, shares a border with Turkey. Because the religion's earliest written texts were almost surely composed from oral traditions, which were much older, it's distinctly possible that they contain the traditions and stories of Turkey as well as Iran. Is it then possible that the underground cities found across Turkey were built as underground shelters to survive the extreme weather events of Younger Dryas, as recorded in the ancient Zoroastrian Vendidad text? And if so, then perhaps it is possible that, having survived the deep freeze, humans returned to the surface and memorialized their survival in the Gobekli Tepe monument, even providing a record of the exact date the event had taken place through a specific astronomical alignment carved on the vulture stone. Think about what this would mean. A proof of the existence of an advanced ancient civilization prior to the Younger Dryas event more than 12,000 years ago, far before any civilization recorded in our history books today. It is not an exaggeration to say this would flip the scientific world on its head and change our understanding of human civilization, of where we came from and how we developed. Perhaps the secrets of this hidden history remain buried underground in Turkey to this very day, waiting to be discovered by some random farmer or renovation project, waiting to change history as we know it. But in one of our previous videos, the one on the enigmatic Gunung Padang pyramid in Indonesia, we showed that Turkey is not the only place where advanced pre-Younger Dryas civilizations existed. So make sure to watch it.
So this is why I call it a super civilization. They had this obsession with studying the solstice and the movements of the sun. This is the whole kind of astronomy side of it.
God.
Yeah, this is actually my little book I've given you. This
right here.
This covers some of the astronomy, the work of Guigolo Magli and also Andrew Collins and J.J. Ainsworth, where there's a whole orientation to the just off north and just off south, following the whole path of the Golden Gate of the ecliptic. Again, this is J.J.'s research, but this fits in, because this was done before we discovered our winter solstice alignment at Karahan Tepe, so this backs it up.
Oh, wow.
This is already there. People know about this. So we've got the northern orientations on the left. So most of the sites, the big enclosures with the big T-pillars, they're like stone circles basically. They're all aligned to the north and variations off the north. And Andrew believes that's linked with the movement of Cygnus, changing position, Deneb in Cygnus, changing position over a few 100-year periods. They reorient each enclosure according to that. So you're going into Gobekli Tepe, and you're seeing these gigantic T-pillars, like this is a reconstruction in the museum with JJ there on the left. You're seeing these gigantic cathedral-like megalithic stone circle enclosures, beautifully carved stones, carved out, pristine. There's evidence now, this is just from this boar statue they found, that they were painted. So there's red, white, and black pigments have been found at the site. So the whole place could have been painted. So you imagine you're a hunter-gatherer. All you've ever seen is the landscape and the sky for your whole life. You turn up to this, and you would just completely blow your mind. I just cannot comprehend. I mean, this is one of the reconstructions done by National Geographic actually years ago, which I think is a bit faulty. I don't think these walls were here originally, but you're talking like, you know, this would blow your mind.
Yeah.
You know, if you were a hunter-gatherer and you go and see something like this, I mean, seriously, it would just, you wouldn't be able to comprehend it. But, you know, just talking, while we're in enclosure D, we actually found another winter solstice alignment here as well.
Again,
yeah. This is, and we're actually going to be checking that out in more detail very soon.
All right, what am I looking at here? What's the sideward V right there?
Right, let's go back a bit. So, like, you see this stone here on the left. This was discovered in 2023. This stone here, a very specific place. This H symbol, these two other things on the side. It's all about the symbolism and the placement of where it was found. That is part of a large circular stone. That is a small section of a very large circular stone. Like you get a Karahan Tepe, the light comes through, illuminates the head. But that is there. The exact position of that is, and if you look on the left, the far left, you've got the little inverted V shape. I think that is a marker showing the difference in the solstices. So the top right there, P30, that's the summer solstice sunrise alignment in 9500 BC. The bottom right, number 7, that's where that stone was found. That's exactly on the winter solstice sunrise point.
Wow.
Exactly. And I think that, and if you stand in the middle, you can see both. And if you go in there, so a friend of mine took this photo, that's the view of the horizon. You've got a clear horizon as well. And the H symbol, hundreds of these are found, especially in this enclosure, or carved all over the stones. You can see a few of them here, these H's everywhere. The H symbol, if you look, the two big pillars and the horizon is an H. So the H symbol is most likely marking astronomical viewpoints. So I think there's a lot more going. We've actually been working on a reconstruction of Gobekli Tepe.
It almost, by the way, on that H thing, it almost reminds you of like a street sign, in a way, like with the arrows. You know what I mean?
Yes, it's telling you something. It's telling you something.
That's remarkable.
And I think this is what it's all about.
It looks modern in a way too. It almost looks like
a lot of it does.
A graphic designer would have done it. You know what I mean?
It is. I mean, it's very odd. I mean, it's the abstract nature of all this is why I think they were on psychedelics, because it's too abstract. You don't just come up with this when you're sitting around doing a bit of hunting, doing a bit of gathering.
That's right.
Something has stimulated you in your mind. You know, this is why, you know, you have to consider that perspective. You know, and I think this is why they were so obsessed with the sky and the stars. It all came alive to them. So inside Gobekli Tepe, this is the reconstruction we're working on. That's the sunrise, and this is just below that on the winter solstice. And just below that is exactly where that stone is. So I think that was a porthole stone there, like you see here, the top one there perhaps. And the sun would come through, and it would just illuminate. But what it would illuminate, we worked out, got a little video, is this stone here. And this stone here, it's very rough, we're still working on it, all in good time, is pillar 43. And the front edge of it has all these carvings on it, which J.J. Ainsworth says relates to the winter solstice. And so this would have actually been illuminated. So there's all these little...
Why is she saying it relates to the winter solstice?
She's done a whole analysis of this, and it's like there's something to do with the hand coming down, and is to do with, you know, reaching down into the underworld. And because the winter solstice is related to death and rebirth and things like this. Now she's writing this up at the moment, but the fact is this is the one that appears to get illuminated. Now we have to double check this. We're waiting to get the full reconstruction done. We're going to hopefully get access inside at this time of year in due course, so we're working on that.
How do you get access to that?
Very difficult, difficult, especially as the archaeologists don't particularly like me or my colleagues I'm working with. But what's also interesting about pillar 43, that's the famous one on the left, that's the one everyone knows about, is that not only do we think it gets illuminated on the winter solstice, it's been decoded by Martin Sweatman, a professor at Edinburgh University, as a calendar itself. And so
as a calendar,
a lunar solar calendar, yeah.
All right, so you have the breakdown right here of
basically it's worked out the amount of them V shapes, like 29 or 30 of them, to do with the lunar months. And then you add another 11 squares, that makes it to 354 days. And you add another 10 V's upside down and above and the other way up.
Yeah,
makes 364. And then he thinks the summer solstice, I believe it's the winter solstice, that's the one mistake, it should be the winter solstice, is where it all connects.
Why do you think it's winter, not summer?
Because it's getting illuminated on the winter solstice sunrise morning. And I think the same thing, Archaeo Tepe proves that as well. But that's just, again, we can't prove this, really, even if we go in there at that time of year, and we still can't prove this is what it was used
That's
for.
some interesting coincidental math then, right there.
Yeah, I mean, Martin Sweatman, he's like a statistician, like amongst other things. He works with chemicals and other things at Edinburgh University, but he's brilliant. He's written this book called Prehistory Decoded. He's spoken at a conference, and I keep trying to, blend his work with ours. It seems to fit. So I'm quite excited about all this, really. I think this is all kind of changing everything. But the problem is that not many people, especially the archaeologists, want to get involved in anything to do with astronomy at these sites. They just don't want it. And I think that's where the real problem lies.
If that's half the story of the site, how can you decide not to get involved?
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry if I'm a bit croaky this morning. I think I did a lot of talking yesterday. So, I'm going to give a shortish talk now about Gobekli Tepe and why it matters. And then I'm going to be joined on stage by Jimmy Corsetti of Bright Insight and Mike Collins of Wandering Wolf. They've both just returned from Gobekli Tepe, where they've seen outrageous things. And we're going to be talking about what's been happening there. But I'm going to set that up with this initial presentation about why I think Gobekli Tepe matters. And there it is before the recent roof covering, which has completely destroyed the atmosphere of the site. You can see the beauty and the majesty of it. This extraordinary megalithic site, which is 7,000 years older than Stonehenge, and which appears virtually out of nowhere with no obvious background, whereas Stonehenge has a very long, detailed background. And again, I showed this slide yesterday. I just want to pay tribute again to Klaus Schmidt, the late, great Klaus Schmidt, the kind of archaeologist I wish there were more of them in the world. He was such a good man, so open-hearted and so passionate about his subject. And it's shameful the way his successors are trying to undo every aspect of his work. This is the Istanbul Chronicle, and Klaus Schmidt's wife is quoted in here because she's horrified by what's happening as well. The Istanbul Chronicle wants to be accessible to everyone, provide readers with news that's objective, clear, and unbiased. Basically, after Klaus Schmidt's passing in 2014, excavation efforts at Gobekli Tepe stopped. And then in 2016, project management was transferred to the Dogus Group, a prominent Turkish conglomerate. And we'll go into the implications of that. But a couple of remarks from Klaus Schmidt's widow. She's also an archaeologist. She visits Gobekli Tepe annually. She was shocked by the changes. She has described the situation as absurd and has shared unseen photos of the road construction on Instagram, sparking further conflict among the archaeological community. In the light of these developments, the site's official opening date for tourism has been announced. This announcement symbolizes how the government's intention with Gobekli Tepe is fully economic, meaning no archaeological development is intended for any time soon, raising concerns in the archaeology community. And then shortly after, Klaus Schwab, founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, made a statement declaring that the Gobekli Tepe excavation has been left for future generations. The most important archaeological site in the world is no longer going to be excavated. It's been left for future generations. And this statement has been interpreted by some, including me, as an admission of the cessation of ongoing archaeological work. So critics question how the Gedogas group has been given such privileges in the light of the stopped excavations and the alleged damage to the site. Ultimately, since 2016, all excavation work at Gobekli Tepe, a site of extreme historical significance, has reportedly been stopped. We've got the roof over the site. We had this whole problem with trees, and thank you to Jimmy Cossetti for drawing attention to the issue of the trees, those olive trees parked. We know that there are hundreds more megalithic pillars under the ground and huge circles of them under the ground which have never been excavated. Those trees were planted directly on top of precious archaeological sites, with their roots going down into the archaeological sites and destroying them. And that would have carried on if Jimmy Cossetti had not drawn attention to this. When he drew attention, when Jimmy drew attention to the harm being done by these bloody trees, he was initially attacked by the archaeological community, who tried to calm our fears and say there's no problem with the trees, they're not going to do any damage. But as the pressure continued and as the exposure of what's happening at Gobekli Tepe continued, suddenly one day they cut down all the trees. Yeah, it shows the pressure works. It shows the pressure works. It shows we have to keep our eye on them. We need to be watching them and what they're doing with our collective heritage. Again, I'm there with Klaus Schmidt. You get a sense of the scale and the beauty of the site. This is the quarry. The large megaliths at Gobekli Tepe were not transported immense distances. Majority were quarried within 100 meters or so of the main stone circles. This is a pillar, very large, probably 50-ton T-shaped pillar, but they never continued quarrying it out because a fault was, actually multiple faults were discovered in the rock. And you can see these interesting carvings that we find all over the site. This is particularly intriguing. I find this icon of a human figure. This is an anthropomorphic figure. We don't see a fully developed head, but the T-shaped, the T at the top represents the head of the individual, and then the individual has arms, and the hands meet just above the belt, around the navel, and that posture is actually reflected in iconography all around the world. It's a very curious thing, these so-called navel idols that are found everywhere. And of course, this is high relief. You can see that to create those fingers, the arms, the belt, they've had to cut away all the stone around it. This is very, very, very highly technical, beautiful work of sculpture. And now, covered with this monstrosity, tamed. This is what happens when archaeology gives way to tourism. That the site becomes tame. It becomes a sort of Disneyland. It becomes an exhibit. It no longer becomes a thing in itself from which we can learn. Yeah, I mean, you can see what Gobekli Tepe is, and you can do so without the rain pouring on you, I suppose. But I don't like this covering at all. I think it's very ugly and very unhelpful. And I'm so glad I was able to see and get to know the site before that happened. This shot, because the moon is in the shot, and this reminds us that for the people of Gobekli Tepe, the skies were very important. The skies were what it's all about. Everything was about astronomical, solar, and lunar alignments at Gobekli Tepe. So what this cover has done is it's disconnected Gobekli Tepe from the universe. This is a site that was meant to be connected to the universe now that it's been opened up, and it's been disconnected. I mean, this is Giulio Magni, a great archaeo-astronomer. He's studied the alignments at Gobekli Tepe, he's noting that the alignment to Sirius and the changing positions of Sirius within the site is extremely powerful and absolutely beyond dispute. Gobekli Tepe isn't alone. We first went there in 2013, Santa and I. 2014, we went to Karahan Tepe. That's what Karahan Tepe looked like in 2014. A few T-shaped pillars sticking out the side of the hill. It's now been excavated, and this is an amazing enclosure at Karahan Tepe. I'm particularly struck by that stone face. Nekmi Karul, who I interviewed in Ancient Apocalypse and who seemed to be quite helpful, subsequently has been undoubtedly approached by Flint Dibble and others, and now has nothing to say about me but negative things. But nevertheless, he appeared on the show with me. We think that this is a snake-like head. It's a snake form with a human head that's emerging from the rock there. Karahan Tepe is now about to have a roof covering also, and work is already underway, as Jimmy and Mike have observed, to drill down into the site and destroy the site in order to make it a tourist attraction. Just a map of the whole region. We have to understand now, Gobekli Tepe is not alone. The Turkish archaeologists are right when they talk about the Tas-Tepeler civilization, the Stone Hills civilization. There's an emergence all around Gobekli Tepe of sites that date back to that same horizon about 12,000 years ago. And not just Gobekli Tepe, that same culture is found over on Cyprus. That means we're dealing with people who were navigators and seafarers. Cyprus was always an island. Even at the peak of the last ice age, it's surrounded by great deeps, and down into the Jordan Valley as well. And Abu Huraira, as I showed you yesterday, is one of the sites that's been identified as a site of a massive airburst from the disintegrating Younger Dryas comet. That's the report on Abu Huraira and how close it is to Gobekli Tepe. And if we look at Gobekli Tepe, we can see that it is situated between the headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. What does Mesopotamia mean? It means between the rivers. Gobekli Tepe is sitting right there, up above where the supposed first, earliest ever human civilization appeared, the civilization of Sumer. I cannot accept that the development of Sumerian civilization is disconnected from what happened at Gobekli Tepe. There is a connection, I'm sure of it, but it's deeply hidden and hard to see sometimes. There's the artist's impression of that airburst over Abu Huraira, and Martin Sweatman has published a book, Prehistory Decoded, where he believes that Pillar 43 in Enclosure D at Gobekli Tepe is a calendar which commemorates the date of the Younger Dryas impact. It's a complicated issue. I'm going to get into this in more depth. Prominently involving the constellation that we know today as Sagittarius. The alignment, you can see Sagittarius there. Do you see that thing that looks a bit like a teapot? Spout of the teapot? That's Sagittarius. And we argue that the vulture on Pillar 43 represents Sagittarius, the constellation we call Sagittarius, and that this is the sun poised over the wing or the arrow of Sagittarius. The location of the sun when it's there over Sagittarius on a solstice happens twice in 26,000 years. Once on the summer solstice and once on the winter solstice. And those two happenings are separated by 12,500 years, half a cycle of precession. So the alignment of the sun over the constellation we call Sagittarius with the center of the Milky Way galaxy, that did occur at the summer solstice 12,800 years ago. But it also occurs at the winter solstice in our time, today. The same alignment occurs 12,500 years later, half a precessional cycle later. And so the one occurrence was on the summer solstice around 12,800 years ago, and the most recent still ongoing is the winter solstice in our present epoch. So I'm there with Martin. isn't Gobekli Tepe. That's a model of Gobekli Tepe in one of the major museums at the nearby town of Şanlıurfa. And we're talking about the imagery on Pillar 43. The airburst over Abu Huraira, so close to Gobekli Tepe, would have been a massive regional phenomenon, remembered for centuries. On the basis of this and much other evidence, Sweatman concludes that the imagery of Pillar 43 is an astronomical diagram featuring constellation figures with the summer solstice sun located just above the spout of the asterism, figured by the astronomers of Gobekli Tepe as a vulture with outstretched wings and nominated by modern astronomers as the teapot of Sagittarius. As such, the pillar serves as a date stamp for the epoch of the Younger Dryas impacts some 12,800 years ago. But the story doesn't really begin with Martin's 2019 book. The story begins earlier. It begins in 2013 with an article that I accepted for publication on my website by a remarkably insightful individual called Paul Burley. And actually Paul was the first to notice the curious nature of the figures on Pillar 43 and to tie them up with the center of the galaxy and Sagittarius. And from the very beginning, Paul, in his work, was looking at the winter solstice moment when the sun aligns through Sagittarius with the center of the galaxy. In fact, what he argued was that pillar at Gobekli Tepe had been carved to forewarn of a future time, the next time that there would be a solstice alignment. And again, these are some of Paul's arguments. The similarity of the bas relief to the crossing of the ecliptic and galactic equator at the center of the Milky Way is difficult to reject, supporting the possibility that humans recognized and documented the precession of the equinoxes thousands of years earlier and is generally accepted by scholars at this time. And what's important here is that for some unknown reason, the builders of Gobekli Tepe constructed a temple apparently highlighting a time 11,600 years in their future. So this also ties up Paul's work, arguing that what we're looking at is the winter solstice alignment occurring in our time. Weirdly, that's exactly the same argument about precession that John Major Jenkins made concerning the Mayan calendar. The Mayan calendar is key to that same moment. The winter solstice, when the sun aligns through Sagittarius directly with the center of the galaxy. That defines the date of 2012. And as I explained yesterday, it's not an instant, it's a window, several decades wide. So what Paul Burley recognized in Pillar 43 at Gobekli Tepe is exactly what John Major Jenkins recognized concerning the Mayan calendar. These two issues are not disconnected. They're closely connected, and they're connected by the phenomenon of precession. It's the cosmic rebirth of the sun from the womb of the galaxy, the dark rift at the galactic center. The former world age ends, the new world age begins. So here's as I said, it's complicated. Both Sweatman and Burley accept the well-established radiocarbon date of 9,600 BC, roughly 11,600 years ago, for enclosure D, and therefore for Pillar 43 at Gobekli Tepe. In summary, Sweatman argues that the pillar was carved to record and commemorate the airburst over Abu Huraira that had occurred 1,200 years earlier than the creation of Gobekli Tepe. It thus serves as a date stamp for the onset of the Younger Dryas epoch 12,800 years ago, when the summer solstice sun stood on the wing of the vulture, Sagittarius teapot, in alignment with the galactic center. On the other hand, for Burley, the ancient astronomers of Gobekli Tepe 11,600 years ago focused not on the summer solstice sun, but on the winter solstice sun. On his analysis, therefore, the imagery of Pillar 43 results from forward precessional calculations, much like those of the ancient Maya with their 2012 date of creation, and depicts the sky of our own time. What if both are right? What if that pillar actually does commemorate the 12,800 year ago event and does contain a message for the future? What if Pillar 43 not only records and commemorates the Abu Huraira airburst at the onset of the Younger Dryas, but also uses the universal astronomical language of precession to carry a message to the future, a forewarning? If you want to send a message to the future, for goodness sake, don't write it down in a script, Because 10,000 years from now, the chances are nobody's going to be able to read that script or ever have any hope of deciphering it, as is presently the case with the Indus Valley script and the Easter Island script. If you want to send a message to the future, use a universal language. Use the language of astronomy and combine it with permanent megalithic architecture, which is hard to destroy. And then you have a message that any culture in the future that is astronomically literate will be able to interpret. So maybe the message is, when next you see the sun in direct alignment with a dark rift at the solstice, beware. Either way, we're dealing with the handiwork of master astronomers at Gobekli Tepe. Again, I talked about Mesopotamia, the location of Gobekli Tepe, and the Tas-Tepeler civilization and the connection with Mesopotamia. And it's intriguing that Mesopotamia, ancient Sumer, has this tradition of a great flood, destroyed the world, pushed humanity back to a rudimentary state, but there were some who survived the flood who had knowledge, and they went around the world and they tried to restore the lost world. They tried to bring the lost world back. And in ancient Mesopotamia, this was Oannes, a figure who supposedly emerged from the sea, and the 7 sages, and they brought wisdom to Sumer, which formed the basis of the Sumerian civilization. That's interesting. I don't mean to be flippant. It's interesting how they carry these little handbags, all of them. We've talked about this quite a lot before. It's a curious thing. There are even physical models of them. They were remembered as teaching advanced astronomical and geodetic knowledge, including all the skills necessary for planning and setting out a city. So there's a figure of Oannes on the left there with his handbag, and on the other side of the world in Mexico, at La Venta, we have this earliest representation of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. You can see his plumed serpent on the top. He was also a civilization bringer in the memory of ancient Mexico, and look what the figure is holding in his hand. He's holding another one of those handbags. I mean, I don't know if there's anything to it, but I can't help looking at this and thinking there's something going on behind the scenes that we're not properly understanding yet. And of course the handbags are there on Gobekli Tepe as well. They're there at the top of Pillar 43. And they carry on through time and in different locations. It's an idea that keeps passing through time. I think this is one of the problems with archaeology. I think we need an archaeology not just of things, not just of artifacts, not just of objects, but I think we need an archaeology of ideas as well. Ideas can be amongst the most enduring artifacts of human culture and can continue for thousands, perhaps even tens of thousands of years. Archaeology is neglecting the ideas of the ancients. So did the idea that there should be a scorpion and a bird in this region of the heavens persist for thousands of years, even while other figures changed their character and the notion of a centaur archer was introduced? And these are the depictions of Sagittarius, but notice he's got bird-like feet and a scorpion-like tail. So it's like this idea has kind of transmuted over time, but we can still see the origins of the idea in the later depictions of Mesopotamian Kuduru stones from the Babylonian period, 2nd millennium BC. Gobekli Tepe, founded 9600 BC, it's a mysterious megalithic site, and it was, despite the protestations of those who are trying to ruin Klaus Schmidt's reputation, it was deliberately buried by its makers after 1,000 years of use and was not seen again until excavations by the German Archaeological Institute got underway in the 1990s. I just want to make another couple of small points. The T-shaped megaliths of Gobekli Tepe, we're looking at there. And then if we go to the island of Menorca, what do we see? We see more T-shaped megaliths. None of the megaliths on Menorca have been properly dated. It's very hard to date megaliths. I'm wondering whether the dating of the Menorca megaliths to about 4,000 years ago is wrong. I'm wondering whether the Menorca megaliths might be just as old as the Gobekli Tepe megaliths. The same kind of idea seems to be shared in both places. And then this kind of circular feel of Gobekli Tepe, and I find myself looking at the temples of Malta, supposedly dated to the oldest Gigantea about 6,000 years ago, the youngest about 4,500 years ago. But again, the dating of the Maltese temples is flimsy. It's based on almost nothing. There are no intact carbon dates from beneath megaliths in the great megalithic temples. They've got some carbon dates at Gigantea, but they're from 40 meters away from the main temple, and they're underneath what was formerly a toilet block for tourists. They've now been excavated, but it's 40 meters away from the temple. That can't tell us the date of the temple at all. I'm wondering if the Maltese temples are much older. I first made this point in season 1 of Ancient Apocalypse. I'm wondering if the Maltese temples have been significantly misdated. And then in the Sicily Channel, you know, Sicily used to be joined to Malta by a land bridge when sea levels were lower during the Ice Age. And in the Sicily Channel, they found this huge megalith at the bottom with holes drilled through it. It's clearly man-made. Underwater between Sicily and the Maltese archipelago, I think much more research needs to be done. I think there may be further examples of this kind of megalithic architecture down there. But Baalbek in Lebanon is a most extraordinary site, and I don't deny that large parts of it are Roman. This is definitely the Temple of Jupiter behind me, and behind that is the Temple of Bacchus, the god of wine, certainly Roman. But I wonder about the larger megaliths there, and this outer enclosure wall at Baalbek. The giant megaliths that we're looking at. This is the trilithon. Each of these stones weighs 900 tons, and they're positioned about 25 feet above the ground. I'm just sitting on top of one of them there, and you can see that gap and these enormous 900-ton blocks. Looking up at them there, now there at my feet is the single piece of evidence that archaeologists point to say, no, those huge blocks were also put in place by the Romans. That single piece of evidence is definitely part of a Roman column, and it's down at the base of the wall. But let's think about this. This place was sometimes used as a fortress. This place was constantly attacked. Attackers undermine foundations to try and get underneath. I think we're looking at a repair block here, using Roman material on much older site. And of course, the extraordinary megalithic blocks still left in the quarry. Supposedly the Romans, although they could lift 900-ton blocks 30 feet in the air, they couldn't lift 1,000-ton blocks, so they just did all the work on this and then just left it there in the quarry. This one weighs, the one I'm standing on weighs about 1,000 tons. This one across the road, now used as a rubbish tip, weighs 1,200 tons. And the new one discovered just at the bottom there, I'm standing on it, that one is 1,400 tons. And the argument is that the Romans did all this work to cut these out, but then just abandoned it. And I think that that's a very un-Roman thing to do. If they truly couldn't move the 1,000 or 1,200 ton blocks, they wouldn't have left them like that. They'd have sliced them up like loaves of bread, and they'd have used the smaller blocks that they created. They would have had use for them. It was a practical culture. They wouldn't have left them there. I think the whole quarry was completely covered by sediment during Roman times. I don't think the Romans even knew that this was there. So Gobekli Tepe raises huge questions over the origins of megalithic architecture, because we know for a fact that the initial inhabitants of Gobekli Tepe were not agriculturalists. They were hunter-foragers, hunter-gatherers. And it's been the dogma of archaeology for decades that hunter-gatherers couldn't create megaliths, that you needed a fully formed agricultural society generating surpluses in order to engage in megalithic construction. Well, Gobekli Tepe just blows that whole idea out of the water. It changes everything, and it is, and I say this with no intent of exaggeration, it is the single most important archaeological site in the world today. And it is shameful that this site is no longer going to be investigated. Karahan Tepe, there I am again, and I just want to compare that rock-hewn enclosure cut out of solid rock with the enclosure of the Great Sphinx. And when Mark Lehner said, show me a potsherd from a civilization 12,000 years ago, I would say Gobekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe are that quote-unquote potsherd.
So we're here with John Anthony West, and we saw his lecture at the ARE conference, and he's also recently been at Gobekli Tepe. So John, I just wanted to get a couple of questions at you about Gobekli Tepe and the Sphinx and Egypt, and just a general one. I mean, why do you think it was so important that they built these sites so long ago? What do you think was their primary purpose, especially in relation to the very ancient sites like Gobekli Tepe?
Actually, it's almost an impossible question to answer, because nobody knows why they built them. That they have this emotional power, particularly the Sphinx, is unmistakable. Gurdjieff used to say, when asked about the Sphinx, that it was a symbol of an esoteric society. My guess is, but it's only a guess, but maybe you might say it's an informed guess, that it symbolizes the animal body. It symbolizes the age of Leo. The lion's body symbolizes man as, flesh and blood, as the animal. And then the head, the human head, which is almost certainly recarved at some later date, might have been altogether a lion to begin with and a symbol of Leo. It could also be, when in its recarved state, the human head representing human potential to divinize, in other words, to become, in Egyptian terminology, a star and join the company of Ra and sail across the sky with him in his boat of millions of years. It's a lovely way to put the idea of immortality. It's not impossible, as fusion of lion and man, that it symbolizes the Aquarius, the Leo Aquarius axis, because Aquarius is associated with humanity. It's the water pourer, and Leo, of course, is the lion. So some combination of all of those things as a ballpark guess, but since the Egyptians themselves clearly didn't really know what the Sphinx was for, it only comes into the Egyptian texts in the New Kingdom around 1300 or so, that is well over 1,000 years from the time it was supposed to have been carved, and we're of course convinced that it's carved tens of thousands of years earlier. So nobody knows what it really was for, but you might say Egypt is a one-issue civilization. Its one single aim is the quest for immortality, the potential of humanity to become a god, literally, in the true sense of that word. So the Sphinx fulfills that role, let's say best guess is that the Sphinx is there to further that quest. Beyond that, nobody really knows enough to say anything specifically, but given the Egyptian doctrine, that's consistent with it.
But with the discovery of Gobekli Tepe, now kind of, like you said, it's like the smoking gun. Yeah,
that is the smoking gun, Gobekli Tepe. The reason being, when we did the water weathering of the Sphinx, that it's thousands of years older, the opposition said, well, how can that be? It's all hunter-gatherers back then. You don't know what you're talking about. The hell with the geology. We don't care. Along comes Gobekli Tepe, which the archaeologists, date to 10,000 BC and maybe even earlier. So that's the smoking gun, because they can't argue that it's a bunch of primitives that produced this whole acreage of interlocked, closely adjacent, major stone circles. So there's no argument with this anymore.
And it's almost like there could be more stuff buried under the ground.
Oh, definitely. Oh, right. Gobekli Tepe is an instance. That was rediscovered by accident because it was deliberately covered up. So if other sites are deliberately covered up, there's much more to be found. And now with ground-penetrating radar, and I forget the name of it, the planes that fly over and LIDAR, do LIDAR or LIDAR. Anyway, they can penetrate. They can basically like radar, but it's flying radar. Detect things that are underground. There's lots of that has been discovered in Egypt already. They don't know what's there. Almost certainly it's not going to be a Gobekli Tepe type major discovery, or they'd be digging already. But the potential of major discoveries is very much within the sites, as it were.
Thank you very much, John Anthony West.
Thank you.
If you are still with me, thank you so much. Hopefully by this point in the bookumentary, it is obvious that ancient matriarchal cultures were a civilization that lasted for hundreds of thousands of years. Matriarchal matrilineal cultures were concerned with the long game. The mystery of the runes shows us that symbolic communication is much more likely to be effective once your civilization is long gone. The symbolic communication encoded in the runes can hopefully show us that the ancient goddess-centered civilization was deeply concerned with leaving behind messages in a bottle that future generations could interpret, knowing that they would not speak the same physical language, but perhaps they could share a symbolic language. This is why there was so much importance placed on the symbolic recurring motifs in the goddess-centered art. Goddess-centered civilizations, remember, were concerned with multidimensional symbolism, and it is quite amazing that the same symbols repeat and evolve throughout the Paleolithic into the Neolithic and then into the Bronze Age eras. So what did this matriarchal and matrilineal civilization truly look like if it was a global civilization that was connected via spiritual ideas and ideals? How did matriarchal and matrilineal power structures actually function? One fascinating case study of what this matriarchal civilization likely looked like can be found in Çatalhöyük, Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, in which we see here a very famous bust of a seated woman of Çatalhöyük who is flanked by two lionesses on her throne.
Note in the lower left corner the golden throne of Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun, who came in the 18th dynasty, almost 6,000 years after the seated woman of Çatalhöyük was likely created. The similarities between their thrones is self-evident, speaking of a likely connection between ancient Egypt and ancient Turkey.
Çatalhöyük is a very mysterious archaeological site that has been studied for decades, and you're likely not going to hear a peep about it in public school textbooks because it challenges all our patriarchal preconceived notions about civilization and how and when civilization evolved. The Çatalhöyük site shows us that this was a deeply spiritual and sophisticated culture that designed their entire cities, settlements, villages, whatever you want to call their urban centers, around a spiritual system that centered women. Çatalhöyük shows evidence of agriculture and bread baking. Çatalhöyük shows evidence of communal living that centered creativity. There is so many fascinating works of art coming out of Çatalhöyük. It offers an abundance of archaeological artifacts to study for those who are curious to know about the goddess and the bull. Let's now switch lanes to archaeomythology in order to further understand the mystery of Çatalhöyük.
Quote, priestesses and women's collective power. From the early phases of the Neolithic onward, the goddess, whose part is played by the priestess, is portrayed crowned or enthroned. In early historical records and in folklore, she is called queen, mistress, matron, or lady. The priestess goddess is assisted by other priestesses and helpers, numbering from 2, 3, 4, or 9, to a whole college. The attendants performed a variety of duties and rituals and temple maintenance. Priestesses and temple attendants are shown in a variety of sizes and are marked with different symbolic design. Next to the goddess were the priestesses who may have formed a council important for decision-making. Councils of 9 women are mentioned in early historic records and exist in European mythologies. The Scandinavian magician priestesses, known as the Volva, had a council of 9 wise women. Assemblies of 9 priestesses, or muses, are well known in ancient Greece. A splendid example of a group of temple attendants is the model of an open temple from Jarku in Thessaly, dating from the early 5th millennium BC. It includes 9 figurines of various sizes and workmanship. One priestess, or the goddess, is shown much larger than her attendants, and she is richly decorated with her special symbols, chevrons and trilines. Communities of priestesses and women's councils, which must have existed for millennia in Old Europe and in Crete, persisted into the patriarchal era, but only in religious rituals. In the earth fertility ritual of the Themosphora, the festival of Demeter in ancient Greece, women did choose a presiding person and form a council in which decisions were voted by majority rule. Men were not allowed to participate. Communities of priestesses having great collective power are well known in early history as sisterhoods of enchantresses, known from Gaulish inscriptions, and as colleges of priestesses living on islands to which men are not admitted, mentioned by Strabo and Pomponius Mela in the 1st century AD. Priestesses as oracles, prophetesses, and magicians are known up to modern times in folklore and myth. Groups of fairies who dance in circles and in meadows or around stone rings, creating enormous energy, appear in folklore from Scotland to Bulgaria, even in the 20th century. The magician goddess, who was originally the goddess of death and regeneration, but who was later considered a magician or a witch, survives up to the present as Basque Marie, Irish Matcha, or Medeb, Baltic Ragana, Scandinavian Freya, and German Holla. These goddesses appear alone or with large groups of assistants, and they exercise supernatural power and control of nature. The moon, the sun, eclipses, storms, hail. They destroy or create fertility of fields and control male sexuality. They themselves are endowed with an inexhaustible sexual energy. Irish Matcha can run faster than the swiftest horses, while the sight of Queen Medeb is sufficient to deprive men of 2/3 of their strength. Those who served the Inquisition in 15th century Spain destroyed huge numbers of witches, those who practiced the rites of the goddess and who had knowledge of medicinal herbs and other healing arts. Among many complaints about the powers of witches given by a soldier to the Inquisitor, there is this notable sentence.
They have such power by reason of their arts that they have only to command and men must obey or lose their lives.
Cited by Baroja, 1979, page 149. Myths and beliefs describe the female as the stronger gender, one endowed with magical powers. The sacred marriage. Rituals uniting the sacred male and female forces may have taken place in old European times, but we have little archaeological evidence for them. Although peculiar by modern standards, in both Europe and the Near East, ancient peoples considered this sacred male and female coupling necessary for the well-being and fertility of the land and its inhabitants. We find widespread text describing sacred marriage rites in the earliest historical records, dating to around 3000 BC, namely. The prevalence of the rite by that time speaks for an earlier origin, probably communal, perhaps in the old European religious system, though little evidence exists. From Çatalhöyük, archaeologists recovered one figurine showing a couple engaging in intercourse. Another came from the Near Eastern Natufian site, dating to about 10,000 BC. The Gumel Nila lovers, a statuette from the Gumel Nita site in southern Romania, which depicts a man and woman tenderly embracing, might portray participants in a sacred marriage. In Neolithic art and in myth, the male deities appear as partners of the goddesses. Alongside the mistress of animals is the master of animals, who may be descended from the Upper Paleolithic image of the half-human/half-animal found in caves and associated with animals. In Çatalhöyük, wall paintings of the 7th millennium BC, a male figure holds a bird in each hand, an image parallel to that of the mistress of the animals known from the Neolithic and later times, who was portrayed grasping geese, cranes, or other birds in each hand. In both the Neolithic and the historical era, the earth fertility goddesses sometimes was portrayed with a male partner. The female and male deities discovered in a grave of the Hamangia culture from the early 5th millennium BC on the coast of the Black Sea very likely represent a sister and brother pair rather than a married couple, since in European mythologies the female and male deities are known to be sister and brother pairs. For example, the Lithuanian Earth Mother, Zemina, has a brother, Zemininkas, and the Scandinavian great goddess Freja has a brother, Freyr. Birth was sacred. In fact, it was probably one of the most sacrosanct events in Neolithic religion. In the early Neolithic, peoples constructed special rooms where birth took place. We may conceive of these rooms as birthing shrines. At Çatalhöyük, in south-central Turkey, ancient Anatolia, excavations revealed a room where inhabitants apparently performed rituals connected with birthing. They painted the room red, reminding us that red, the color of blood, was the color of life. Stylized figures on the walls illustrate women giving birth, while circular forms and wavy lines painted nearby may symbolize the cervix, umbilical cord, and amniotic fluid. A low plaster platform could have been used for actual birthing. The color and symbolism in the room suggests that people regarded birth as a religious event and that they accompanied it with ritual. On the island of Malta in the central Mediterranean, the Tarshian and Minajra temple artifacts indicate similar practices. These artifacts include a model of a low couch that could have served birth-giving and a birth-giving figurine with 9 lines across her back. The connection between moisture, life, and the life-giving goddess contained deep cosmological significance. Human life began in the watery realm of a woman's womb. So, by analogy, the goddess was the source of all human, plant, and animal life. She ruled all water sources, lakes, rivers, springs, wells, and rain clouds. However, the key to understanding Neolithic renditions of the bull's head and horns, bucranium in archaeological literature, comes through their resemblance to the female uterus and fallopian tube. In the temples of Çatalhöyük, on a series of female forms, there are actually depicted bucrania where the uterus and fallopian tube should be. The analogy takes on more meaning when we consider that rosettes, often identified with bull's horns, correspond to the flower-like ends of the fallopian tubes. The artist, Dorothy Cameron, who originally made this observation, speculates that people observed the corpse's anatomy unfolding during excarnation, when birds of prey stripped away the flesh and exposed the internal organs. However peculiar this symbolism may seem, there is no denying its existence. Bucrania consistently appear associated with tombs and the goddess's womb. Conclusions. The reconstruction of the pre-Indo-European social structure of Old Europe is possible if various sources from different disciplines are used: linguistic, historical, mythological, religious, archaeological, especially the evidence from cemeteries and settlements. Evidence from these disciplines shows that the old European social structure was matrilineal, with the succession to the throne and inheritance passing through the female line. The society was organized around a theocratic, democratic temple community guided by a highly respected priestess and her brother, or uncle. A council of women served as a governing body. In all of Old Europe, there is no evidence for the Indo-European type of patriarchal chieftainate. End quote, via Dr. Maria Gimbutas from The Living Goddesses.
I feel it is important to echo Maria Gimbutas' sentiments about the massive misconception of what matriarchy truly was, considering the fears that so many toxic, masculine, mediocre men exhibit about the very word matriarchy, because they believe that it's the opposite of patriarchy, in which cis heterosexual women are dominating cis heterosexual men, when that's not what matriarchy was at all. So what is a matriarchy? A matriarchy is not a society that favors the feminine over the masculine. It is a social system that integrates the idea that every human being originates from a mother as a cultural pattern. A matriarchy recognizes that optimizing a society towards mothers and children creates a just and balanced society. A patriarchy favors the masculine over the feminine. It is a social system that is anti-nature entirely, optimizing the society for whoever is at the top of the pyramid. Therefore, matriarchy is not about dominance of one perceived sex or gender over the other. Matriarchy is about balance and shared power. Some matriarchal indigenous cultures had up to 5 gender and sex categories in which power was equally distributed. Everybody had their role to play. Now let's explore how matriarchy made space for everybody to walk their paths to accumulate personal power.
Quote, "My results suggest that political life, of course it is a hypothesis, it cannot be easily reconstructed, but we can judge from what remains in later periods and from what has always existed in mythology, because this still reflects the social structure, has been structured by the avuncular system. The rules of the land. The queen is equally the high priestess and equally her brother or uncle. The system is therefore called avuncular, which comes from the name uncle. The man, the brother, or the uncle were very important in society, and probably men and women were completely equal. In mythology, we encounter sister-brother pairs of female goddesses and male gods. It is wrong to argue that it is only a culture of women, that there was only one goddess and no god. In art, men were less represented, it is true, but male gods existed. There is no problem regarding this aspect. In all mythologies, for example, in Europe, Germanic or Celtic or Baltic, you will find the Earth Mother or the Earth Goddess and her companion or male counterparts next to her. Furthermore, there are other couples such as the Goddess of Nature, the Regenerator, who appeared in spring and gives life to all the animals on the earth, humans, and plants. She is Artemis in Greek mythology. She is called the Animal Lady, and there are also male counterparts of the same gender called Animal Lords. Representations of this appear in Çatalhöyük in the 7th millennium BC and are found everywhere in prehistory. So that we should absolutely not neglect this aspect. There is a balance between the sexes everywhere, both in religion and in life. Furthermore, they believe that everyone was equal in relation to death. I really like this idea. You are nobody, neither queen nor king, when your bones are gathered together with other bones. The The system from which the maternal culture prior to the Indo-Europeans came was very different. I say maternal and not matriarchal because the latter always gives rise to ideas of domination and is semantically opposed to patriarchy. That was a balanced society. It is not true that women were so powerful as to usurp everything that was masculine. Men occupied their rightful positions, did their jobs, had their duties, and even had their power. This is reflected in their symbols, where not only goddesses but also gods are found. The goddesses were creators. They created from themselves. In a time as distant as 35,000 BC, from symbols and sculptures we can observe that the parts of the female body were creative parts, breasts, belly, and buttocks. There was a different vision from ours, which had nothing to do with pornography. The vulva, for example, is one of the first engraved symbols and is symbolically linked to growth and to semen. Sometimes there is a branch or plant pattern near it or even inside it. This type of symbol is very long-lasting, persisting for at least 20,000 years. Even today, in some countries, the vulva is a symbol that offers security of creativity, continuity, and fertility. Religion played a huge role, and the temple was a kind of center of life. The most beautiful constructed objects were produced for the temple. They were very grateful for what they had. They always wanted to thank the goddess. They consecrated her and appreciated her. The head priestess and the queen were one and the same person, and there was a kind of hierarchy of priestesses. Women were equal beings, it is very clear, and perhaps they were more honored because they had more influence in religious life. The temple functioned thanks to women. End quote, via an interview with Dr. Maria Gimbutas on the Mother Goddess, Indo-Europeans, Birth and Development of Patriarchy, originally conducted on the 3rd of October, 1992.
Side note, why were the high priestesses, brothers and uncles, important in matrilineal and matriarchal ancient civilizations? Well, in my humble opinion, when you understand mitochondrial DNA and the context of matrilineal succession, it makes logical sense that the brother and maternal uncle of the high priestess would hold high social status in ancient matriarchal and matrilineal civilizations. Mitochondrial DNA is only passed from mother to child, so the brother and maternal uncle of the high priestess would share the same mitochondrial bloodline. This expanded awareness of the complexity of matrilineal, maternal, matriarchal social structures can hopefully plant seeds of deeper curiosity as to the mystery of it all.
Quote, Isis' Egyptian name means seat, i.e. authority, and is the principle of legitimacy. The actual physical throne, as depicted in the ancient Egyptian symbolism with Isis wearing a throne/seat upon her head. Osiris, is written in hieroglyphs with the glyph of the throne and the eye, combining the concepts of legitimacy and divinity. Throughout Egyptian history, it was the queen who transmitted the solar blood. The queen was the true sovereign, keeper of the royalty, and guardian of the lineage's purity. Egyptian kings claimed a right to the throne through marriage to the eldest Egyptian princess. By marriage, she transmitted the crown to her husband, but he only acted as her executive agent. The pharaohs, as well as the leaders of smaller localities, adhered to this matriarchal system. If the pharaoh/leader had no daughters, then a dynasty ended and a new dynasty began, with the new reverend maiden woman as a new seed for a new dynasty.
Did matriarchal power structures last for thousands and thousands of years because they understood that subtle soft power has the ultimate say in the long game? Did matriarchal power structures understand that in the mystery of life itself, biology mirrors cosmology, therefore subtle cosmic forces are of deep concern to those who are leading a population of people. Perhaps ancient matrilineal and matriarchal power structures developed cosmology, astrology, and numerology, a rich spiritual life that centered the high priestesses, that centered women and centered procreation. Perhaps ancient matriarchal power structures understood that a subtle wait-and-see approach is more effective when cosmic events affect Earth events. Perhaps ancient matriarchal civilizations had a completely alien perception of power. Perhaps ancient matriarchal civilizations perceived authentic power as the invisible hand, subtle forces of the earth and the cosmos that are meant to be worked with in order to exert influence, not dominance. Perhaps ancient matriarchal power structures observed the ebbs and flow of power, the push and pull between polarity. Perhaps ancient matriarchal power structures observe the tension that arises as different groups of people consolidate personal power. Perhaps ancient matriarchal power structures centered collectivism over individualism, understanding that authentic power lies with the people, not power over the people. If there was no organized warfare in ancient matriarchal civilizations, then what is true authentic power? Perhaps matriarchy was more concerned with long-term legitimacy versus short-term authority. All empires fall, all pyramids crumble, chi rises and chi falls, so perhaps ancient matriarchal power structures created spiritual systems, ideas, memes that could travel throughout time and take root and manifest in different cultural contexts. To recapitulate, matriarchy is not the opposite of patriarchy, in which women control, manipulate, and dominate men. No, matriarchy of the Paleolithic and Neolithic eras was something much more mysterious, much more ancient, and much more long-lasting than a patriarchal Ponzi scheme meritocracy masquerading as a democracy, the great grift that keeps on grifting, the patriarchy.
The dramatic relation between life and death in Çatalhöyük. It is obvious that the dead played an important role in everyday life in Çatalhöyük, a Neolithic and Chalcolithic settlement in southern Anatolia, existing from about 7,100 BC to 5,700 BC. Life was by no means easy. There was a lot of infant mortality, and many women died in childbirth. As a result, death occupied a crucial place in the artworks, and through these artworks I tried to find out how people in Çatalhöyük dealt with life and death. I also did this on the basis of Sumerian texts, although they were written much later and far away from Çatalhöyük. I am sorry, but I simply could not do otherwise. I start with this ceramic statue made by an anonymous artist about 8,000 years ago. It is very impressive, although it is less than 20 centimeters high. In the middle sits an overwhelming mother goddess who is giving birth to a child. However, she is sandwiched between two felines, feared predators who live to kill. This image thus shows the contrast between giving life and taking it away. And I got the idea that this contrast was dominant in the Çatalhöyük culture. End quote.
On the right, you can see depictions of various figurines discovered in Çatalhöyük. Note that the red coloring indicates where reconstructions in modern times were done. Therefore, it's important to clarify that the head of the seated woman of Çatalhöyük, enthroned in between two felines, possibly lionesses or leopards, is a reconstruction. We don't actually know what the head looked like originally. Therefore, just keep this in mind when discerning what the facial structure likely was. We can determine this obviously by comparing it to other statues and figures found in Çatalhöyük, but it is another layer of the mystery as to who was truly the enthroned mother goddess. Perhaps this is ironically appropriate that the true identity of the seated mother goddess of Çatalhöyük remains a mystery lost to the sands of time. Perhaps, in my humble opinion, it is only fitting that her true face remains veiled to us.
12,000-year-old bull geoglyph at Gobekli Tepe relate to older bull and female art 25,000 years ago, and later goddess and the bull cults, like I believe, seem to be at Çatalhöyük? I interpret this as 3 stages in a woman's life and a leopard's pet's life as well, growing in 3 stages with the woman, from a child to adolescence and then a young adult. I reject the proposing that the small middle figure is male. Note the leopard claw in the top middle of the image. Underneath is a female figurine dressed in leopard skin blouse and a fringe woolen skirt. A leopard clawbone pendant from the possible woman shaman priestess burial with a plastered head held in her arms is from Çatalhöyük, which dates from around 9,500 to 7,700 years ago in Turkey. Special items and art, as well as special elite burials at Çatalhöyük. Top view. Here are 2 male figurines sitting that seem to be wearing leopard skin caps that, like the male hunter in the wall art, that are not common, thus likely reflects elite. Note bottom left. Dagger with male burial from shrine level 6B. Moreover, the elite male skeleton seems to also be in a body position at burial, like the 2 male figurines, tightly sitting with his arms at his legs. Note top right corner, the leopard crown. The male hunter from wall art wearing a leopard pelt from the temple in level 3. Note top left corner, purpose male figures. Note middle male hunting figures. Note bottom women's head and women in hunting art. All these depicted figurines or hunting art are from Çatalhöyük, the first religious design city, dating around 9,500 to 7,700 years ago in Turkey. I reject the first 3 fat male figurines' purpose to have bushy beards on 2 factors. First is that all depictions of male or female are clean-shaven and bald. Second is that all males are depicted as average or thin, and only women as thick or fat. End quote by Damian Murray at Hope.
if you're still with me, dearly beloved, as we are 1 hour deep into the mystery of the Mother Goddess figurines, the Quadruple Goddess. Thank you so much. Let's explore other layers, other levels to the cosmology of the people who lived in ancient Anatolia during the Paleolithic and Neolithic eras, and dive deeper into the connections with other important smoking gun sites that have been discovered, like Gobekli Tepe in Turkey. For everything is interconnected. That is what the study of archaeoastrology, cosmology, and archaeomythology teaches us.
The Goddess and the Bear, Hybrid Imagery and Symbolism at Çatalhöyük. Introduction. The Neolithic site of Çatalhöyük in Turkey's Konya Plain, circa 7,400 to 6,000 BC, was discovered in 1958 by British archaeologist James Mellart. During 4 seasons of excavation between 1961 and 1965, Mellart's team uncovered over 300 rooms, many of which contain not only well-built domestic features and skillfully produced crafts and tools, but dozens of polychrome wall paintings, clay and plaster bas-reliefs, ritual installations, and sculptures indicating a pervasive and sophisticated ritual life that extended throughout the duration of the Neolithic occupation. The people of Çatalhöyük were not peasants. Apart from being competent agriculturalists, builders, and painters, weavers, and undertakers, they also made baskets, mats, wooden vessels, and clay pots. They smelted copper ore. They carved bone and stone into statuettes of their deities, as well as into mortars, pestles, querns, polishing stones, etc. They carried on one of the most sophisticated chipped stone industries in obsidian, volcanic glass, and imported Syrian flint. They were traders and prospectors, ranging far and wide over southern Anatolia, since the Konya Plain itself lacked all manufacturing resources except food, clay, reeds, and mud. Within the domestic context, Mellart found rooms which he considered to be shrines or sanctuaries containing wall paintings, multiple bucrania, reliefs of various kinds, and numerous human burials. A number of these special rooms contain large anthropomorphic bas-reliefs in a specific open leg posture with arms raised in an orant position. The faces, hands, and feet had all been carefully removed before each room was filled in to provide the foundation for the construction of a new building. The people at Çatalhöyük constructed a cosmology, derived in part from hardwired experiences of certain altered states, and reproduced that cosmology in architecture and images. This approach does not stand isolated, even in the current context of archaeology in Turkey. In his report on Gobekli Tepe, Klaus Schmidt discusses the transition of socioeconomic systems and sociocultural patterns from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic, and with the continuity of archaic worldviews. Other researchers have also commented on the fusion of Paleolithic and early agrarian beliefs. Cosmic logics are superimposed over the old cosmic genesis and configurations of the shamanist cosmos. They are still not forgotten in Çatalhöyük. ceremony among the Nganasan in central Siberia, for example, elder women make offerings to not one goddess, but to the mothers of nature. Kwan Ami, Mother Sun, Muan Ami, Mother Earth, Niun Ami, Mother Life. Mother Sun is the creatrix, the great ancestral mother, the force that generates all living things. The solar deity is radiant. Light and warmth stream from her. In the Arctic and subarctic zones, Mother Sun provides the conditions for life to persist. The Sami people in northern Scandinavia personify the sun as the Sun Maiden. When the shaman transcends the limits of the world of the living and flies to heaven, he/she has to be careful not to be burnt by the hot breast of the Sun Maiden. And the petroglyphs of Siberia, representations of the creatrix, are often associated with animals. Neolithic depictions of this divinity are known from the area of Okinawa and western Siberia. Snakes undulating as the flames of the sun are symbols of the regenerative potential of this solar deity who takes on the task of creation, the great labor of generating and regenerating life. As a related variant, in the shamanism of the Altaic peoples, the origin of all life was born from the goddess of fire, Ene. In the communities of the Tungus, Mongol, and Turkic peoples of Siberia, there was a special professional group of female shamans, the Udagan, whose rituals focus on fire worship. Pregnancy and life-giving are the major themes of the goddess of fire, expressed in pictorial associations of the primordial goddess with the tree of life. The mythical power that has been attributed to female figures in different roles from prehistoric times to the present finds is counterpart in the respect for women's spiritual abilities for maintaining community life and the rules of cosmic order, as, for instance, among the Nanettes. Violation of the rules could lead to universal catastrophe, and women, in particular, were responsible for maintaining the existing order of things, since, according to mythological and poetic stereotypes, they were endowed with enormous capacities for both destruction and creation. In contrast to goddesses of the historical periods, Gimbutas defined an earlier concept of goddess in all her manifestations as a symbol of the unity of all life and nature. Her power was in water and stone, in tomb and cave, in animals and birds, snakes and fish, hills, trees and flowers, hence the holistic and mythopoeic perception of the sacredness and mystery of all there is on earth. End quote, via the Journal of Archaeo-Mythology.
Therefore, with this expanded awareness, we can now theorize with high probability that many of the, quote, hunting, unquote, scenes, which patriarchal archaeology has projected onto so much Paleolithic and Neolithic art, perhaps since these were matriarchal civilizations and cultures that created this artwork, there is deeper layers of implied meaning. Perhaps there are both men and women participating in hunting, not just men. Perhaps as well, these are shamans and shamanesses participating in ritualized hunting or rituals involving interaction with animal totems. There is so much more mystery here, and that mystery is cosmic, because if you do not have the framework of cosmology, you are not going to understand the actual implied meaning of Paleolithic and Neolithic art. Everything must have a cosmological or astrological basis in order to understand what we're looking at here. The hunter-gatherer primitive projection of patriarchal quackademia is rooted in sexism and racism, and it is a blockage which prevents us from fully understanding what life was like in ancient matriarchal times. If we believe the gaslight that these were only, quote, primitive hunter-gatherers, unquote, then we're not going to be able to perceive the advanced astronomical and astrological wisdom encoded in the art. Are these star maps of the precession of the equinox, perhaps?
At Çatalhöyük, some of the cultic hunting scenes depict possible goddesses, female, shamanistic pagan figures, or female ancestor spirits. However, possibly it could be all of these characteristics, which was a female ancestor spirit of a female shaman that turned into a goddess or a demigoddess protector. I view these art scenes as hunting cult behavior of the early paganist males with a totemistic type of warrior shaman, and demonstrations of bravery, taunting, and ritually playing with strong animals such as bears and bulls. Is there one ancestor goddess or demigoddess in each of these three hunting scenes? Well, I think it likely could be so, or at least something like that, as all others seem to be men. Cult ritual, not just standard hunting. End quote via Damien Marie at Hope. Quote, Cro-Magnon hunter, Orion and Osiris. The Cro-Magnon would have observed the heavens or the illusory patterns formed by the alignment of various stars. Depictions of the various constellations such as Taurus and Orion and mythology surrounding them are of great antiquity, and it appears that similar patterns were observed by the Cro-Magnon people. Consider, for example, the sorcerers or shamans wearing the horns of a bull and possibly representing the constellation of Taurus, a symbol which appears repeatedly in Lascaux, the Hall of the Bulls, and in the deep recesses of other underground cathedrals dated from 18,000 to 30,000 before present. And above the back of one of these charging bulls appears a grouping of dots or stars, which many authors believe may represent the Pleiades, which is associated with Taurus. These Paleolithic paintings of the bull appear to be the earliest representation of the Taurus constellation. The shaman, attired in animal skins and stag antlers, graces the upper wall directly above the entrance to the gallery at Les Trois Frères in southern France, possibly representing the constellation of Orion/Osiris. End quote, via Ron Gabriel Joseph, via the Astrobiology Research Center, first published in 2017 in Paleolithic Cosmology and Astronomy, 30,000 BC, Constellations, Cave Paintings, and Cosmological Consciousness.
In antiquity, the Pleiades star cluster was known as the Seven Sisters, also known as the Seven Hathors, aka Heteru in ancient Kemet. The Pleiades reaches the highest point in the sky during Samhain, which is traditionally celebrated on the 1st of November, about halfway between the autumn equinox and winter solstice.
If you're still with me, dearly beloved, thank you so much. Let's level up, buttercups. Keep on moving into the mystery. For if you can believe it, there are perhaps even more levels of deeper implied meaning to the goddess figurines. Some researchers, such as Noah Sage, have proposed that certain goddess figurines, such as the well-known Venus of Willendorf, is in one aspect depicting a cataclysmic comet impact. The comet impact theory, in my humble opinion, is one of the most intriguing ideas coming from Archaeo-Astronomy and Archaeo-Astrology about the goddess figurine. So let's dive deeper.
Quote, so if they are not fat, distorted women, what are they? Perhaps they are images of large comets impacting with Earth, which would have caused tremendous disturbances in the planet's magnetosphere, cosmic ray influx, and layers of sedimentary material. In other words, two large comets impacted and caused a reshaping of the planet. I will let the images and sketches tell the rest of the story. End quote, by noahsage.com.
While admittedly this may sound far-fetched to some scholarly ears, I fully find the idea fascinating considering the context of the Younger Dryas catastrophe, which surely was caused by a comet impact over 12,000 years ago. And we perhaps see evidence of this particular comet impact during the Younger Dryas at a pillar in Gobekli Tepe called Pillar 43, which is also in Turkey, like Çatalhöyük. Therefore, the interconnectivity is resonating at such a loud frequency. It is begging us to connect the dots here. There would be a vested interest in a culture that experienced its civilization being hit by multiple comet fragments during the Younger Dryas catastrophe to leave behind some type of record of this cataclysmic event, this apocalyptic event. And it was of utmost importance in so many other artifacts that the civilization left behind in ancient Anatolia. So it just makes sense that through this focal lens of reinterpreting all ancient artifacts, not merely as just artwork, but documentation of perhaps very real, tangible, meaningful earth events, and not just intangible spiritual ideas and symbolic communication. All aspects are valid. There are multiple levels, and all levels ring true. Just because it is true in one aspect does not mean the other aspects are also not true. This is yes and when interpreting Paleolithic and Neolithic art. Everything is open for interpretation, and I think this idea of the Mother Goddess figurines encoding information about cyclical catastrophe triggered by the precession of the equinox synthesizes all the threads quite nicely together for me personally. Side note, I feel it's important to clarify that I fully understand that the Venus of Willendorf statue, the goddess of Willendorf, predates the Younger Dryas catastrophe. I am not proposing that this particular statue is related to the Younger Dryas comet impact hypothesis. However, what I am proposing is what we're looking at here is a continuation of a legacy tradition that evolved during the Paleolithic and Neolithic eras, in which symbolic art such as the Mother Goddess statues, animistic nature art, are symbolically communicating to us concepts about cataclysmic cosmic events that changed the earth in such a profound way. Ancient peoples were compelled to document these cataclysmic events and create a physical, tangible object that could carry that memory forward into time. That way future generations never forget what happened. The connection here is that the Venus of Willendorf, just like Pillar 43 at Gobekli Tepe, which came thousands of years later, communicate to us these complex concepts and cosmic cataclysmic events. How would they summarize and encode all that information in a way that would convey it to future generations in meaningful and effective ways? That is the connection between the goddess figurines and Pillar 43 at Gobekli Tepe. This is a continuation of a legacy tradition of symbolic art encoding cosmic and astronomical advanced wisdom. Just because the Venus of Willendorf predates the Younger Dryas catastrophe does not mean that it's not describing a past comet impact whose cycle overlaps with the future cycle of the Younger Dryas comet impact. Catastrophes like comet impacts, cataclysmic Earth events, as well as extreme climate change are cyclical and are, by some mysterious reason, connected to the precession of the equinox, to the movement of the cosmos. So if comets, for example, were a cyclical phenomenon, then it would make sense that ancient cultures would create documentation of these celestial events. Whether or not you want to admit it, we as a collective on Earth are constantly at threat to cosmic comet impacts. We are constantly dancing with danger with the cosmos, And in fact, 2 times every year, our planet moves through the Taurid meteor stream, where likely the comet that hit Earth during the Younger Dryas impact came from. So just keep that in mind. Let's now read an excerpt from my book, Astrology for Divination, about the mystery of Pillar 43 at Gobekli Tepe, the mystery of Cygnus, the mystery of the goddess Deneb, the eater of the souls of the damned, Reverend Mother.
Quote, common associations with different deities, for example Juna, Vesta, Ceres, etc., are not just a modern astrological fantasy projection. Such an obvious sign falling from the heavens was not rationalized away as mere coincidence, simply a flaming rock impacting Earth randomly. Is there a more profound reason why comets, asteroids, and meteors were given mystical, almost fearful reverence in ancient cultures? It seems the ancients were deeply concerned with tracking and predicting comet impacts in order to preserve the memory of past collision cataclysms triggered by the Earth's precession through the equinox. Archaeo-Astronomy as a discipline sheds new ideas about the importance of comet impacts. Graham Hancock and Martin Sweatman's work on Gobekli Tepe's Pillar 43 in Turkey, as featured in the Netflix documentary Ancient Apocalypse, drew international attention to the Younger Dryas comet impact theory. In a paper published in the journal Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry, they argue that the so-called vulture stone carved on Pillar 43 is a date stamp for a catastrophic comet strike 13,000 years ago. It appears Gobekli Tepe was, among other things, an observatory for monitoring the night sky. Martin Sweatman, a chemical engineer at the University of Edinburgh and the study's lead author, said in a media release, one of its pillars seems to have served as a memorial to this devastating event, probably the worst day in history since the end of the Ice Age. This is spooky and eerie, Hancock said, because it appears there is overwhelming evidence that the people who made Gobekli Tepe had a profound knowledge of precession, and it appears that they deliberately sent forward into time, in this time capsule, a picture of the sky and our age. Furthermore, Sweatman, along with Hancock, argues that the carvings on the stone are in a clockwise progression that represents the constellations in the night sky. It is our Rosetta Stone, Sweatman proclaims. Astoundingly, he then asserts that the pattern of asterisms could only have occurred on the day a comet struck Earth 12,800 years ago. If true, it would be one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries ever made. Stone Age people documenting a comet strike that may have occurred 12,800 years ago deserves a full spread in a top scientific journal, such as Nature or Science. It does appear a comet or comets struck about 12,800 years ago based on detailed dating and other evidence found in the layers deposited worldwide from the impact. Sweatman claims on Pillar 43, the famous vulture stone. Pillar 43 is a date stamp for 10,950 BC plus or minus 250 years, i.e. 12,950 years ago. Finally, Hancock contends, however improbable it may seem, therefore, we are obliged to consider the possibility that in 9,600 BC, 1,350 years after the comet strike, the builders of Gobekli Tepe were already so advanced in their knowledge of precession that they were able to calculate its effects for thousands of years backward and forward in time in order to produce an accurate symbolic picture. If I understand the message correctly, we're in the danger zone now. By a process of elimination, we have seen that Gobekli Tepe cannot be inviting us to consider the equinoxes, and nor can it be inviting us to consider the summer solstice, even at the favorable moment of sunset. This leaves us only with the winter solstice, with the sun in Sagittarius targeting the center of the Milky Way galaxy, the definitive astronomical signature of the years between 1960 and 2040 in our own epoch. A signature that recurs only at 26,000 year intervals. Pillar 43 at Gobekli Tepe suggests we are a species with amnesia whom have forgotten a massive comet impact which forever altered our planet at the end of the last ice age. Therefore, comets could be interpreted as important agents in the evolution of civilization on Earth. Alternatively, comets could also be interpreted as a message reminding humanity of Earth's fragility in the greater solar system. Or, on an even deeper level, these heavenly agents could be a reminder of life's origins. End quote, via Astrology for Divination, magical guidebook for decoding your birth chart.
The Younger Dryas comet impact hypothesis is corroborated by Pillar 43 at Gobekli Tepe. Tracking comets in ancient astronomy and astrology's original cultural context was of practical importance for the civilization's longevity. The implications of comets as well were deeply mystical events for ancient peoples. My intention is to present information through a synthesized web to weave together a narrative. That way, the curious student of archaeoastrology and archaeoastronomy can make up their own mind and come to their own intuitive interpretations of what the information is telling us. If you're still with me, dearly beloved, thank you so much. As we near the final stages of our journey in this Archaeo-Astrology bookumentary, I would like now to synthesize some deeper subtext that perhaps my astute witches in the Collective Coven have already put two and two together. In my humble opinion, what I am hinting at here is the Paleolithic and Neolithic matriarchal, matrilineal, and maternal civilization that we have explored through our focal point of ancient Anatolia in modern-day Turkey is deeply connected to the same wisdom, lineage, legacy of the Isis Mystery School, which, as we have learned, was a covert matriarchal power structure that existed simultaneously behind the scenes of the overt patriarchal power structures that developed during the dynastic eras of Egypt, which we associate with the pharaohs. The sisterhood or mystery school of Isis has deep roots in antiquity. The seed that planted this mystery school likely comes from even before the time of Çatalhöyük and Gobekli Tepe, perhaps from aeons ago. Why do we see this repeating motif of the two lions all across the globe? Was this covert matriarchal power structure a global coven or council of highly evolved women and two spirits? Was this covert matriarchal power structure, which we see its claws have sunk into so many different parts of the globe, was the mystery school of Isis something that goes back 30,000 years ago? Does it go back perhaps 60,000 years ago? Does it even go back as far as 100,000, 200,000 years ago? In my humble opinion, the fact that we see the same iconography, the same symbolic communication in ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, ancient Nubia, and ancient Anatolia, modern day Turkey, shows that the connection that is self-evident may not necessarily be a genetic connection. It may not be a racial connection. It may not even be a physical connection in which one party from perhaps Turkey migrated into Egypt. That is not what I am proposing here. What I am suggesting is that the mystery school of Isis was a spiritual system that took root in multiple timelines and multiple civilizations, and it stems from a long lost mother culture that likely developed even before the Paleolithic and Neolithic eras. In my humble opinion, ancient Africa is the source of civilization itself, and we must acknowledge the deep anti-black racism that is pervasive in Eurocentric studies. And we must acknowledge that when we're talking about the Paleolithic and the Neolithic eras, melanated people were in Europe before white people even existed. Melanated people were likely in ancient Anatolia before white people even existed. Melanated people, when we go back in time to 30,000 years ago, 60,000 years ago, we must acknowledge that melanated people were the prototype majority, and therefore this is why I feel there is this deep implied connection between ancient Kemet, ancient Nubia, ancient Egypt with Turkey. Perhaps the people at Çatalhöyük were melanated. Perhaps the people of Gobekli Tepe were melanated peoples. But really, what's more relevant is that their spiritual wisdom system, their profound astronomical knowledge and astronomical awareness of the precession of the equinoxes stems from the tradition and legacy of melanated peoples coming out of modern day Egypt, modern day Sudan, modern day Chad. This is the truth, perhaps, which has been so deeply obscured by internalized supremacy ideologies that we can't even fathom, we can't even accept the likely logical deduction that the first Europeans were melanated, that the first peoples in all continents were melanated peoples, no matter where you go. No matter if it's in Turkey, no matter if it's in Britain, no matter if it's in China, the first humans to arrive on those continents out of Africa were melanated, and therefore the mystery school of Isis is indigenous to Africa. The connections are self-evident and deeply mysterious and deeply intriguing. And there are connections, whether or not you choose to remain willfully blind and in denial. These connections, repeat, are self-evident truths, and they're inviting us to dive deeper into the mystery of it all and ask the questions that academics and archaeologists and Egyptologists of Eurocentric circles refuse to ask. Perhaps the walk-away lesson that we can learn from covert matriarchal power structures like the mystery school of Isis is that perhaps true authentic power lies within creating spiritual systems that elevate the consciousness of the people and that persist throughout the precession of the equinoxes. Perhaps authentic power is creating symbols that future generations can find meaning in, even though they do not speak the same tongue. Perhaps authentic power, which the mystery school of Isis very much understood, lies within the realms of the immaterial. We sometimes underestimate the power of the mind, the power of belief, the power inherent in the spiritual mysteries. What is our true potential as human beings? What capacities do we have lying dormant within us to evolve, to expand, to create, and to destroy?
The three zodiacal ages, spanning from the age of Virgo to the age of Leo to the age of Cancer, potentially witnessed major cataclysmic events on Earth which nearly destroyed the pre-flood mother civilization. Dr. Carmen Volter, by correlating ancient texts with modern astrophysics time models, theorizes that the civilization we understand as Atlantis/Lemuria likely survived 4 major Earth catastrophes: 11,600 years ago, 17,500 years ago, 58,000 years ago, and 85,000 years ago. Dr. Volter's research also suggests that the Dendera zodiac of ancient Kemet records ancient cataclysmic events. Perhaps the 3 Virgos between the constellations of Libra and Leo could be alluding to 3 previous Earth catastrophes. In her book, Message from the Past, the Russian physicist Svetlana Pavlova explored the Dendera zodiac and the events of which it testified. Dr. Carmen Volter stated that Dr. Pavlova's work, which proposed that the Dendera zodiac is a precessional calendar of catastrophes, deeply resonated with her own work. Astrology was sacred to the elevated ancient ancestors because maybe it gifted them a framework of foreknowledge regarding when and how to prepare for natural disasters triggered by the precessional cycle. If the Dendera zodiac is indeed a calendar of catastrophes, then it makes logical sense that the ancient Afro-Asiatic civilization we understand as Atlantis survived multiple Earth catastrophes. To reach a golden age level of awareness, such a civilization certainly would have evolved throughout multiple precessional cycles, most likely. Furthermore, Russian scientist Valery Uvarov's work on the Dendera zodiac corroborates Dr. Pavlova and Dr. Volter's interpretations. Valery Uvarov claims that the images in the Dendera zodiac record a planetary disaster which occurred roughly 13,659 years ago, likely during the last age of Leo, and was caused potentially by a comet impact. The Younger Dryas comet impact theory suggests that the Earth's angle of inclination, and thus its entire axis, changed. As a result of the comet impact, the point of sunrise began to shift on the line of the ecliptic in the opposite direction, entering into the, quote, heart of the lion, unquote. The outer circle of the Dendera zodiac is composed of figures, also known as decans, or sections of the arc of the zodiac with the size of 10 degrees each, symbolizing the passing of time. The decans move counterclockwise. Going by the constellations along the line of the ecliptic counterclockwise, the sunrise on the vernal equinox in the year of the comet impact was in the first minute of the first degree of the head of the Cancer constellation. This potential comet impact therefore interfered with the zodiacal precession of time, causing a bending of space-time. The arm of the zodiacal clock moved 2 decans backwards upon the impact. So, according to Valery Uvarov, the whole zodiacal sequence of events was such. Earth had gone through the age of Leo, entered the age of Cancer. The planetary catastrophe occurred, and then the Earth made a time jump seemingly returning to the age of Leo, thus entering the age of Cancer twice. Interestingly, Dr. Pavlova also wrote about an ancient Mayan prophecy which spoke about catastrophe occurring, quote, when the claw of the crab pierces the heart of the lion, unquote, alluding to the Cancer-Leo cusp. Ergo, does the Dendera zodiac subtly draw our awareness to the Cancer, Leo, and Virgo cusp with the mystery of the three Virgos? These cusp of transitions are clearly important points in the precessional cycle, which the elevated ancient ancestors who made the Dendera zodiac are saying, hey, look over here! How else would an ancient civilization record a massive Earth catastrophe which may have caused a time jump as a warning for all future generations who they knew would not speak their language? Obviously, via images and symbolism, using a universal language of astronomy and astrology and cosmology. Therefore, whether it's the mysterious three Virgos in the Dendera zodiac or the vulture pillar at Gobekli Tepe, the elevated ancient ancestors were clearly attempting to document something of vast importance. What truly happened 13,000 years ago at the end of the Younger Dryas period. As always, there are potential multidimensional meanings which we can interpret and intuit via the framework of precessional astrology. The descending age of Virgo is the earth element, mutable modality, yin polarity, and ruled by the planet Mercury. This zodiacal age likely also witnessed one of the first major world floods, invoking themes of the Magician Major Arcana, adaptation, intelligence, integration of esoteric wisdom, and consummation or completion of the Golden Age civilization's previous life cycle. Meanwhile, the descending age of Leo is fire element, fixed modality, yang polarity, and ruled by the sun. This age was during the Younger Dryas cataclysmic event, invoking the themes of the Strength Major Arcana, foreknowledge of cataclysm, survival, willpower, and preservation of legacy. Finally, the descending age of Cancer is water element, cardinal modality, yin polarity, and ruled by the moon. This age was likely matriarchy's final percolation burst, invoking themes of the High Priestess Major Arcana, intuition, regeneration, rebuilding, and rebirth of what was lost. In conclusion, awareness of the precession of the equinox can be synthesized into applicable personal astrology if you're willing to open up to the mystery of time, your soul contract, and karma. Remember that each zodiac sign on a deeper level represents an entire aeon of time corresponding roughly to 2,160 years each. Precession gives us an alternative way of perceiving time as a circle or cycle, which all ancient cultures seemingly shared as a perception. No matter what point in the circle you are, all other points still exist or vibrate in a different density or dimension of time. Tracking the precession of the equinoxes was a highly esteemed matter of life and death significance to the ancients. Obsessively tracking the cosmic cycles was something of utmost importance in order to never forget the memory of past catastrophes and the constant churning of the cosmic wheel of fortune. As they may say, if you don't know your herstory, you are doomed to repeat history.